Good evening, everyone. If everyone could take your seats.
Oh, you're going there.
Mr. Sutton, you're going to sign in?
Yeah, please.
Yes, Mr. St. Carlos Sutton.
I'm advising.
You're welcome. Yes, sure. Can we do 2 minutes, or do we need to do less?
Oh, no, we're supposed to do 2 minutes, yeah.
We know we added
Because 3
time.
minutes.
Got it, okay.
Or what you would get. So just
Good evening. If everyone could take your seats. Welcome to the October 28, 2019 Planning and Development Committee meeting. We have a quorum. Do we have a motion for approval of the October 14th meeting minutes? Motion passes. Or do I need to all in favor?
yes.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Item A. No, I need it.
Just have somebody write down.
All right. Thank you. We have public comment, and we have time for everyone signed up to have 2 minutes of comment. After that, we will have a community presentation that will be 5 minutes. Is that person here and ready to present on behalf of the community? Yes, thank you. Oh, no, 1 second.
I'm sorry. Could I just ask a question, Chair Simmons? Is there going to be a presentation from Northwestern?
Could you please, yes, if you could have a seat, I'll give the
Okay,
rest of
well,
those details.
Sorry, the community person that I thought you were speaking about is, if
I'll clear it up. Thank you. So the community asked for an expert witness to have comment, and I am allowing 5 minutes. Is that person here? Yes. Thank you. So you will have 5 minutes to present. Northwestern will be presenting for 10 minutes.
Wait a second.
For 10 minutes, and then we will move on with the agenda. Thank you.
Could you clarify why they get 10 minutes and the community gets 5?
They're the applicant. This isn't a public hearing, and this is public comment. So I'm making an exception even for the residents to have 5 minutes additional of comment. Our first speaker is Mr. Mike Vasilko.
Thank you very much. The Plan Commission did a disservice to the community at large, to the neighbors near Northwestern's Welsh Ryan Arena and Ryan Stadium, and to this council. This issue should never have reached the City Council. The Plan Commission demonstrated their lack of integrity and bias towards Northwestern. Northwestern did not provide a parking study. Northwestern did not provide a traffic study. Northwestern did not provide an economic impact study regarding property values. Northwestern did not provide an acoustical study to determine the open-air professional concerts and other events that could take place. They have not been ruled out. Changing zoning from not-for-profit university to for-profit professional athletics and entertainment is a change of zoning, not a text amendment. That requires all of these studies to have been submitted, and they were not. Please deny this application. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Ray Freeman.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say I agree with everything that Mike said. Appreciate Alderman Tom Suffredin writing the article, saying it's okay to say no to Northwestern. So please do that. Thank you.
Jonathan Baum.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Baum, and I live at 2754 Broadway. I live a block and a half from Welsh Ryan Arena, and Ryan Field, and I support expanding Northwestern's ability to host for-profit events. I have lived in my current home for more than 20 years, and I grew up in a house 2 blocks from these Northwestern facilities. I have never felt besieged by guests at Northwestern events. Occasional bouts of a little temporary inconvenience? Sure. But let's look at the big picture. For my whole life, NU has always been an important presence in our city, and as a community, we have been much the richer, both financially and culturally, for it. I do not fear for the value of my property, and I do not believe that the desire of some residents of one particular neighborhood to live in tranquility should take precedence over making our entire community more vibrant, generating patronage for our local businesses, and securing tax revenue essential both to meet the needs of our entire community and to hold the line on residential property taxes. I encourage you to advance the proposal before you. Thank you.
Evie Russell?
Hello, I'm Evie Russell. There's a history of conflict going back decades and it affects the decision you're facing tonight. NU's playing fields originally were on its main campus. In the early 1900s, over the objections of citizens, NU built wooden stands on Central Street Tract. Now there are several athletic facilities there. The Evanston zoning code didn't allow professional sports or commercial events there, and those things were banned. But for a long time, NU did not pay attention to the ban. In 1969, NU illegally hosted a tennis tournament there, and when they did it again the next year, the city sued. One of NU's common tactics was to claim precedent. The idea that, because in the past the city had allowed for-profit events, it couldn't restrict NU's ability to put on such events in the future. We know all the story about the Bears game. One of the main reasons the city could not get an injunction the game was played because the precedent argument was used. The city, tired of this, and added language explicitly limiting NU's activities to amateur non-profit events in the zoning code. NU argued that the city lacked the power to restrict its activities that way. It kept on hosting or trying to host illegal for-profit events, and those events often generated their own lawsuit. Then NU sued the city, trying to invalidate entire zoning restrictions. It went all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court. The court sided with the city and upheld the zoning restrictions. Even after that, NU hosted illegal events, kept trying to change the zoning code. Every time, the city council found that lifting the ban on pro sports and commercial events would hurt residents, and they voted to protect them and reject NU's proposal.
20
now,
seconds.
NU is trying again. This time, they want a blanket permission to put on an unspecified event as of right. The NU first 2 proposed amendments asked to put events in all athletic facilities up to the full seat capacity. NU would like to eliminate all the restrictions on pro sports and
Thank you,
for-profit
Ms.
events.
Russell. Thank you for your comment.
Okay.
Next,
I
we
want
have
to-
Ms. Carrie Cole
I want
or
to hand some
Ms.
things to the
Carrie
council.
Cole. Please do. Thank you.
All right, so I'm Gary Cull, and I'm going to start
Thank
talking
you.
so I get more than 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Why is history important? Well, history is important because it defines the very fabric of our lives. It creates precedent, and precedent, of course, is the cornerstone of our laws. Consistency of our laws allows for stability, predictability in our communities, and the existing ordinance was created over 50 years ago after a number of attacks on the neighborhood by Northwestern abusing its purpose, as it wants to do again.
I'll give it to you.
Fair government then created standards, and these are the standards that I ask you to look at before you decide how you're going to vote, because, as someone has already mentioned, those standards have never been addressed even by your planning committee, much less this particular committee. You know, if you were to change this law right now, Northwestern is asking you to change this law not because they've met those standards or because they presented you with any research or studies. It's simply because they want to buy that change with city revenue. And don't believe for one moment that this is the only thing that they'll do. If you allow it at this point in time, you've given them fodder for future lawsuits. They will be able to cite this precedent, and when they try to push beyond the barriers that you've already set or we're trying to set, the lawsuit will prevail. It is simply, you know, Stephen Engelman said, and I'm surprised to quote Stephen Engelman, but once said in 1996 when they tried to do this, that if you allow women's tennis, it may seem benign right now, but it may create more drastic events and allow more drastic events that will affect the neighborhood. the question becomes, how will you be remembered in history? Will you be remembered by aldermen like Alderman Engelman, who protected his residents, or you will be the Benedict Arnolds that do not protect the residents? So it's up to you.
Lori McFarland or McFortune?
McFarland.
Thank you.
So I'm a lawyer, so I also tend to focus on the legal standards that would apply here. But before I get into that, I want to quickly correct a misconception. The Plan Commission got the mistaken belief that the amendment would actually reduce the number of large events at Northwestern that take place. That is simply not true. Currently, the only large events that NU actually holds, over 3,500 of people say, are football, basketball, graduations, which are 29 event days per year. With this amendment, it would be 42 event days per year. That is a 45% increase, so almost half as much again. So that will increase, it will intensify the use there. Let's talk about the standards. Gary noted that these are the legal standards that apply. We have given you all packets that go along with some of the presentations by the neighbors. There is one that has the standards on it. For instance, the first one, is it consistent with the comprehensive general plan, which are our overall zoning values, really? Is it compatible with the character of the surrounding development, which is entirely residential? You don't want to create conflict by putting contrary uses right next to each other. And then will it have an adverse effect on property values? And that is important for two reasons. First, safeguarding Evanston's property tax base. And second, these are people's homes, which are often their biggest assets and their nest eggs in many cases. The last is, are existing public facilities adequate, or will it place a greater strain on the city's infrastructure? And there is also the purpose of the zoning amendment code is to allow for amendments when there is a need for them.
15 seconds.
I would say that Northwestern has not demonstrated that it meets either the standards or the need. I also wanted to address factor number one, but I don't think I'll have time. If you flip over the sheet that has the standards on it, you will see listed things from the comprehensive general plan.
Thank you for your
And will
comment.
show the inconsistency. Thank you.
Judy Burge.
Good evening. My name is Judy Berg. I'm a 26-year resident within 500 feet of the U2 district. I come to you tonight to talk about the impact of large events on Evanston businesses. Over 50 Central Street businesses who feel they are underrepresented by the Chamber and by the city have signed the petition opposing the NU proposal. This represents more than half of the business in the Central Street shopping area. You can refer to the email in your packet from an owner of notice. We'll give you more information. Many businesses in the Central Street area are deserted on large event days. At a previous meeting, one business owner expressed that on large event days, all there is a large sea of purple. The traffic is congested, there's no parking, pedestrian traffic is doubled, twofold. There are no customers coming to their businesses. Local patrons stay away during large events because of the reasons above. While we all want to support our local businesses, on large event days, many of us have shopped and dined in Wilmette, complete with free parking on these days. Those attending NU events go to the event, they leave, they're not staying, they're not shopping local businesses or venturing downtown. NU is aiming to meet all of the attendees' needs inside their own athletic facilities by expanding food offerings and selling alcohol inside. If passed, it will be competing with local entertainment venues throughout the entire city, giving NU an unfair advantage, as NU doesn't pay property taxes on its venues, restaurants, or bars.
10 seconds.
I encourage all of you to say no to Pro. Thank you.
Amanda Britton.
Hi, I'm Amanda Bratton, and my statement is about whether NU's proposal is compatible with the surrounding area. It's not. Let me share why. First of all, it's a matter of safety for families in the area. Currently, we are able to plan for safety issues of increased traffic and people because collegiate events are predictable in many ways. Special non-collegiate events will come with multiple unknowns. We are now concerned that strangers, congestion, and impaired driving through side streets will adversely impact the safety of our children year-round. We expect game day concerns and we plan accordingly, but we have always counted on quiet stretches of time when we can let our kids play at our park or walk a few blocks to a friend's house in relative safety. Increasing events to a year-round schedule equates to an increased and year-round safety risk to the communities adjacent to Northwestern's athletic facilities. These adverse effects wear away at the unique character of our tightly knit social neighborhood, which leads me to my second point. Upholding the current U2 zoning is a matter of precedent for protecting all neighborhoods and their unique cultures. Our neighborhood west of the U2 zone may be one of the best kept secrets in all of Evanston. Families who move here often say they feel as though they've stumbled into a time warp back to a time when life was a little bit simpler. Young and old look out for each other. Kids play pickup baseball games in the park, and friends go caroling during the holidays. We hunt for Easter eggs and trade Halloween candy next to a community campfire. We gather in the dark depths of winter to share meals together. The decision to move away from this precedent can put all of our neighborhoods at risk.
Thank you, Ms. Brighton. Thank you. Next, we have Mary Rosinski.
This is like speed talking. Hi, I'm going to try to cut through this really quickly. I'm a 32-year resident of Evanston. I've been a real estate broker on Evanston and North Shore communities for 40 years, and my job involves working with clients to buy and sell residential and investment properties. Well, this has provided me with a wealth of experience, insight, and information as to how existing zoning and zoning changes impacts real estate markets as well as buyer-seller economic decisions pertaining to real estate. I'm asking you to preserve the trust of people have in your city and adhere to your zoning code. People look for stability when they are purchasing a home or opening a business. What appears to be a similar use is indeed significantly different, and the economic impact of changing this use to allow commercial use at a huge facility in the middle of residential neighborhoods will have economic and precedent-setting impacts felt throughout the community for years to come. There are over 700 properties within 1,200 feet of the U2 district. This is not a question of whether or not Northwestern is a good university or a great asset. It is, but it is not a commercial venue. It is bigger than the Rosemont Horizon. It is bigger than Wrigley Field. It is bigger than the United Center. The assessed value of the 700 properties surrounding this place total $340 million. You can see it here. This is only a quarter of a mile. And those properties pay $8.4 million in taxes. About $8 million go to the city coffers and school budgets. If that tax base is lost by depreciation, it'll have to be picked up by other taxpayers in other areas of the cities. These homes have substantial value because the people buying in them have had confidence in you, our city government, to maintain their use in the current zone. A study done in 1970s and again in 1996 has said that to change the use to professional sports,
10
that
seconds.
the athletic concludes that doing so would cause nearby property values to deteriorate as homeowners stop investing in the upkeep of their properties. This will result in less transfer taxes, less property taxes, and less permit fees. And there's more to it, and this is ridiculous that we have to talk so fast that we get 2 minutes to talk about the biggest zoning change in all of
Thank you,
Evanston.
Mrs. Rosinski. Ken Prosky. Ken Prosky.
Before I start the timer, please, you have a handout from me. I'm not going to get anywhere near through it, but I'll do the best I can. I thought I was going to be able to show slides, but I can't. So.
Thank you. Starting now.
My name's Ken Prosky from the 7th Ward. At earlier meetings, you've heard me present maps, charts, and analysis comparing the 14 Big Ten arenas, access roads, and proximity to residences. Since then, when you haven't seen, I've added 8 Ivy League schools to this analysis because many believe Northwestern is actually more like these schools. This information is in your packet. These comparisons are relevant because, with one exception, each university in town has separated their sports arenas from residential areas to minimize congestion and conflict. They also have infrastructures that support large crowds at their arenas. If you look at the map for Northwestern, you'll see that there are over 520 family homes, 21 multifamily dwellings adjacent within 1,000 feet of the arena. There are dramatic differences at all of the other 21 schools in the Ivy League and the Big Ten. Most of these have no homes within 1,000 feet. They have adequate parking, access roads, and are separate from residential areas, even the more urban Ivy League schools. The U2 district is inside of, not separate from, a packed residential area, and there is insufficient parking infrastructure. For example, there's only enough parking for about 58% of the people that go to the arena. And there's a parking analysis in one of the slides that you can take a look at. The reality is that there are unavoidable landlocked constraints that prevent separating the U2 district from residential areas. Existing events already place a strain on the neighborhood. Adding 13 days of sold-out temporary events will make a difficult situation even worse by increasing the intensification of use
15 seconds.
beyond the current overcapacity. I leave you with the U2 zoning code that states temporary events like those in the proposed amendment shall not impose an undue adverse effect on neighboring streets or property. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Berman.
Good evening. I'm a 29-year resident of Evanston, and I'd just like to give you a little perspective as a retired lawyer and judge about the legal analysis that I think is going on here. There's two things you have going for you here, two things to guide you. One, there's a burden of proof, and two, there are factors that are delineated in the ordinance that you have to consider. And I'm going to sum up a little bit about what my neighbors have said. The burden of proof is on Northwestern. It's on Northwestern to show that there is not a negative impact. It's not on the neighbors to show the opposite. They haven't done that. And the second thing is you have to go through the factors that are outlined in the ordinance. And this is what my neighbors have talked about. First of all, the first factor, the request is inconsistent with the general plan. Northwestern has not given you a single reason, a single goal of the plan that this would help. Second of all, the amendment's inconsistent with the overall character and existing uses of the immediate vicinity. Northwestern ignored this standard completely, while you've heard from numerous people how it is inconsistent. Third, adverse effect on adjacent property values. You've heard from Ms. Rosinski. You're going to hear from our experts about this, and it's just common sense. And when the city revenue drops because everyone's appealed their tax assessment in 2 years, that's going to be the reason. Fourth of all, the existing facilities are inadequate. They've been inadequate for years. This is just going to make it worse. Finally, this is all unnecessary. Northwestern has enormous financial resources. They don't need the money. They just want the money. And they have campus facilities where they could stage these events. It's simply a matter of whether the concerns of hundreds of tax-paying, longtime Evanston residents will be ignored in favor of an extraordinarily wealthy, tax-exempt entity which has demonstrated no actual need for this amendment. Thank you.
Is that Andy Berman? Christina Brandt?
Good evening. My name is Christina Brandt. I reside in the 7th Ward. I come before you tonight to voice my strong opposition to granting Northwestern University's request. I also come before you as a previous resident of other Big Ten communities, which include Madison, Wisconsin, Iowa City, Iowa, and Ann Arbor, Michigan. Sadly, by far the most contentious and least cooperative relationship between city and university is here between Northwestern University and the city of Evanston. This is due in part to asks such as this, which put undue burden on the residents of Evanston by a long-standing institution who enjoys its land free of tax burden. However, this freedom is not without cost. The residents of Evanston shoulder the financial burden directly placed upon them by Northwestern status. There are no benefits to cite that offset the negative impacts on the Evanston neighbors. An abundance of entertainment options already exist for Evanston residents. These include City Center's theater productions, Evanston Space music events, Chandler Lawn events, Northwestern theater events, Evanston Rocks, Mudlark Theater, ETHS theater and music concerts, Fleetwood Jourdain Theater, Evanston Symphony, Northlight Theater, Northwestern Symphony events, concerts in the parks, seasonal festivals, not to mention Chicago and Ravinia, which are both a short train ride away. If you choose to support the change in zoning ordinance, then please be prepared to explain why you voted differently than your predecessors in this immensely important matter. I am hopeful for brighter days ahead when the City of Evanston and Northwestern University can have a truly collaborative and respectful relationship. Please vote no on taking the NU zoning amendment any further than this forum to recognize the current imbalance which exists between Northwestern and the residents of Evanston. We are relying upon you, our elected representatives, to improve the balance between your residents' needs and Northwestern's wants. Thank you.
One second, Ms. Mann, thank you. Sure. Thank you.
Doctors have a Hippocratic oath. First, do no harm. Elected officials here in Evanston may not have that oath, but they do have something more important. They have the philosophy on which this city government is based, and that philosophy puts the interest of its residents, not its institutions, first. That philosophy says that zoning in the city will support institutions only to the extent that they don't do harm to residential communities. Each one of you is regularly asking the others to do something to look out for the good of people in your ward. Today, Alderman Suffredin and Alderman Ravel are doing just that, and I hope that each of you will listen carefully, because nobody knows better than them. Nobody knows better than the 2,000 people and 50 businesses that have signed our petition. No one knows better than the hundreds of people who have written to you, emailed you, called you, or shown up at meetings what harm this proposal will do to the north side of Evanston. 2 weeks ago, I was here because Alderman Rainey had a proposal that would help her community, not our community. Lowering or giving a tax break in her community means taxes go up in ours, and all of you virtually supported her, right? Well, here's another instance where we need you to step up and support us, because what's good for the north side of Evanston is good for all of Evanston. We need to vote. We need you to vote no.
10 seconds.
Uphold the plan for the city, uphold the zoning laws, and vote no on this ordinance, and say no to a large institution with an $11 billion endowment that is trying to advance its coffers at the expense of the neighbors.
Rosa Sosa? Mr. and Ms. Sosa? Roger, sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Roger Sosa. I'm the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm here to present my support for this initiative. I've come basically with facts and statistics that we've drawn. The Chamber of Commerce did a survey of Evanston residents and businesses. We surveyed 2,000 individuals. Our results are fairly plain. 71% were in favor of the proposal. I can present you with the rest of the statistics. I have the survey results with me, but they were provided to to earlier commissions as well. So 71% of the residents who were surveyed in the community were in favor of that proposal. Let's talk about the economic impact of the additional events. I would appreciate the same level of courtesy that I gave everybody else. The economic impact of the additional events. First of all, in the local economy, studies that we have done in conjunction with the theaters of Evanston show that every person who attends an evening or a theater event in the city of Evanston spends approximately $30. If you do the math with that, that's approximately $1.2 million in the local economy of additional sales. I do not believe there is such a thing as a crowding out effect where people stay home because other people are in your community. community. The sales of tickets at the event will generate another $475,000 in tax revenue, and that's, again, just math. I can have those things here as well. The above impact doesn't include items like hotel rooms for teams, visiting performers, and things like that that will add additional revenue. Property values are plain and simple not hurt by increasing events. We've studied the property values for the last 10 years. They've remained steady, and in fact, the highest property sales numbers were in 2017 and in 2019, times of increased activity by Northwestern on campus. And the property values now in this area are at the highest they have ever been. They have followed the trend of the market up and down, but they have just statistically gone up toward the northwest corner.
15 seconds.
Property values aren't hurt by proximity to a concert venue. Studies by Realtor.com showed that proximity to a concert venue increases the value of your home by 9%. If you're looking for something, it was published in 2017. I have the study with me, so I will present that as well to the commission. So we've got some stats.
Thank you.
And that's it. My conclusion is essentially this is good for Evanston.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. And if we could respect all the speakers, thank you for your professionalism. Thank you for this additional information, particularly in this area right here, if you could let the speakers have their say. Next, we have Karen York, possibly, might.
Excuse me. Hi, my name is Karen York. My husband and I have lived at 2622 Eastwood Avenue for the past 15 years. I was going to yield my time, but I decided to take a few moments to say a few things. First of all, I believe that my neighbors agree with me. This has nothing to do with being anti-Northwestern University. One of the things that we liked moving into this neighborhood was the fact that we understood the kind of community spirit and the kind of fun time that you could have on a Saturday during a football game. This is however, not the same for an expanded use of that facility for evening events that are not of a collegiate or not-for-profit nature. And I would like to counter the previous speaker, who I know. I have a small business. I am a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I pay dues every year, and I do not want this to pass, nor do any of our neighbors. We did not buy our house and pour over $150,000 into it, which we are still continuing to do, so that we could live next to a large event venue like Soldier Field or Allstate Arena. Please support the people that voted you into office and deny this request by Northwestern. I'll yield the rest of my time to our expert speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't yield time, but we do have the next speaker is Jim Young.
Hi, good evening. I'm the chairman of the steering committee for the Evanston Zonings for Fun. We say yes to the NU proposal for Welsh Ryan Indoor Arena. We support the proposals to amend this for the zoning code to allow 7 events per year at the Welsh Ryan Arena. This proposal will provide jobs, additional tax revenue, and add to Evanston's growing reputation as a cultural and entertainment destination, and we think there's an element of equity that has not been focused on. The proposal is limited in scope, doesn't establish any binding legal precedents, and expires on December 31st of 2021. To date, I have not heard any equity discussed, and from our group's perspective, this is very important, and we're disappointed that it hasn't been addressed. We asked the question, why did the City of Evanston approve a water pumping station on Church Street over the objection of Fifth Ward neighbors, and why aren't the same or similar standards being applied tonight? I heard the gentleman say 71% of his respondents agreed for this should pass. As part of our effort, we went out and we had a petition. I sent it to you on Friday with 90 signatures. We've got an additional 10 plus an additional 27 on e-signatures. 2/3, 2 out of every 3 people we approached were in agreement. We went to the Main Street train station. We went to the Davis Street train station. And we think that there's a broader part of the community that is in support of this effort. We recognize the inconveniences that some people are going to feel who are right in the immediate neighborhood. We recognize that and understand that, but we think that this decision should be a yes for Northwestern, and it's in the best interest of the entire Evanston community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Carlos Sutton. This is, oh, thank you. One second. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Simmons and members of the Plan and Develop. It's very ironic that I stand here this evening since my family was rejected from the 7th Ward in 1927 and our house was moved out to the 5th Ward. But the bigger question here is, why do we have zoning ordinances? Zoning is to provide for consistent property standards and protection of citizens to have quiet enjoyment in their own homes. No variance, no zoning that will adversely affect residents should ever get to this point to even be considered for enactment. I am opposed to Ordinance 135019 and request that you deny approval of this. Thank you.
Jane Grover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 3 disclaimers. Jane Grover, 2677 Prairie Avenue. First, I live a few blocks from Welsh Shrine Arena in the Central Street Business District. My block of Prairie Avenue is affected by and burdened by activity generated by all those places. Second, my son attends Northwestern University, and for those who question how he was admitted, Joe would be glad to share his qualifications for admission to the university. Third, I do chair the Equity Empowerment Commission, but I do not speak for the Equity Empowerment Commission, rather as an individual and for some of my neighbors who are not comfortable speaking tonight. On the question of whether to allow events at Welsh Shrine Arena, I offer an analogy for you. Let me put in your mind the image of an iceberg. What we've been talking about and hearing about tonight is what's above the surface of this iceberg. Those are issues such as assumptions about traffic and about how people will travel to these events at Welsh Shrine Arena, assumptions about the behavior of attendees, the assumptions about the ability of Evanston Police and Fire and Northwestern Police to be able to manage these events, what the City Council decided 20 or 30 years ago, the university's intention and character, the economic impact, revenue generated, whether events such as these proposed or like what we hosted at Canal Shores this summer or Evanston Ravinia affects property values and safety of children. I ask you to think about what is really below the surface of this issue iceberg, and that would be, as Mr. Young suggested, some of the equity issues here. And one that I'd like to highlight is that there is another Evanston institution that hosts many, many events all year round, events that pack their parking lots, that jam the streets with traffic, that park up the streets, that bring outsiders to Evanston, and that, of course, is Evanston Township High School. The neighborhoods around ETHS bear also a huge burden for hosting these events that generate economic activity in our community. Those are tax-paying, long-term residents of Evanston who live in the 2nd and 5th wards. The question here tonight should be, what is in the best interest of the community as a whole, with mindfulness about the hyperlocal impact of these kinds of events.
Just 5 seconds.
And the proposal recommended by staff and endorsed by the Plan Commission is a best practice for something like this. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final comment is Patrick Hughes.
Hello. Thank you. I live right next door to Welsh Ryan Arena, Ryan Field, and I'm in favor of this ordinance. I'm in favor of it for the 2-year idea and see how it goes. I think 7 events doesn't seem too much to me. I just want to take this time to say I really appreciate that Northwestern has made this process open and available for comments. They've gotten beat up. And I just, over 10 years that I've been kind of working on things with Northwestern, I just want to say I really appreciate what they're doing. And I understand some of my neighbors are not happy with this, but I live literally right next door to it, and I'm kind of excited about it, to be honest with you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And next we have the community presenter. Oh.
There's 2 experts today, property value, economic sector.
That's fine. There's 5 minutes, so how you split it up is your choice. You said that you signed up and you're not on here?
I signed up as well.
What's your name?
Stuart Dallas.
Could you come up, please? Could you spell the last name, please? Stuart.
O-T-T.
E-S-M-A-N.
E-S-M-A-N. Thank you. 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Stuart Gottesman. I reside at 2740 Broadway Avenue. Moved into the neighborhood about 8-9 years ago. I love the football games. I'm supportive of Northwestern generally, okay? But this proposal adds a significant number of dates, and we already are unable to park on our streets for about 30 days a year. So it's going to have major impact on the community. I think Northwestern needs to figure out whether it is a for-profit entertainment company or whether it's a not-for-profit educational institution. If they wish to have professional events and for-profit activities on campus adjacent to our neighborhood, then they should be paying property taxes for all of their property. The last thing that I would say is that in the time since the last time Northwestern tried to do this, and I appreciate their efforts and their interests, nothing has changed. If anything, there's less parking. So every time before this, the City Council has said we're going to protect the neighbors and the neighborhood. I don't think anything has changed here other than fewer parking spots on Northwestern's area, and I ask you respectfully to vote against it.
Thank you for your comment. So next we have the community presentation.
Tim Emo, Master's in Economics, University of Chicago, 2 degrees from Northwestern University.
Could you spell the last name again?
G-U-I-M-O-N-D. I testified in 1996, and the council was unanimous against pro sports at Ryan Arena. I have submitted this to the alderman. I would encourage you to read my written testimony because I am not a speed talker or a speed reader. But I refute everything that Mr. Sosa from the Chamber of Commerce said in this document. Please read it. It cites much of the economic literature which says that these kinds of things are losers for cities, and in some cases they're negative impact. So you might actually be doing, let me read one little thing. This would be the economic equivalent of Evanston imposing a tax on itself, its residents, and its businesses, all for the benefit of Northwestern. And Northwestern, right now, they pay $1 million to this city, and that's it. They claim they pay ticket tax revenue. They do not. The attendees at events pay tax to the city, not Northwestern. I'd like to know what else they give to this city. And like I said, please read this document. If you do, I think you might have second thoughts. Much of the economic literature actually cautions government officials to take with a grain of salt the economic impacts that are presented by chambers of commerce and people like Northwestern that have a vested interest in getting it passed.
It's Tim.
My name is
Yes.
My name is Howard Richter. I'm a member of the Appraisal Institute with the MAI designation and one of fewer than 500 people in the country designated as a reviewer of appraisals. I'm twice past president of the Illinois Association of Real Estate Appraisers, etc. You have my professional qualifications. I've appeared dozens of times before planning committees, city councils, village boards, etc., on the question of what we appraisers call adverse economic impact of adjacent uses. Among those occasions, I will remind you, one is in Lisle, Illinois, where the board's refusal to give me more than 2 minutes to speak went all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court, which threw out the village board decision because solely under Open Meetings Act, as a paid expert, I should have been entitled to equal time, unlimited time. I caution you on that. One of my other times experience in testifying before boards was the 1996 Northwestern University case here in Evanston. At that time, a Northwestern so-called expert made the broad statement that increased activities would have no impact on values. I then presented a very detailed study we had done for a fee, which showed a 13% impact on home values surrounding Dyke Stadium with its limited event schedule. To even suggest that increasing the number of events and the size of events being held in a residential neighborhood has no impact on values is on its face impossible. There is no one more representative of the kind of people who buy the homes in this neighborhood than the people from the neighborhood who have appeared tonight. They believe their home values will be impacted. Since they are typical of the people buying homes, people coming to buy homes in the area will have a similar reaction. It's evident, it's self-evident. In 1996, Northwestern attempted to have a real estate expert testify that there was no adverse influence. It was laughed out after my presentation. Any suggestion today that it will not adversely impact values is ludicrous. At a minimum, your ordinance requires the petitioner to demonstrate what the impact is. The reason for my appearance today is Northwestern University should be held to that standard.
1 minute.
There is an appropriate method and technique in appraising called paired sales analysis. It was done at Yale when they expanded their athletic activities, and as a result, the homeowners at least got major real estate tax reductions because the demonstrated negative impact on values was recognized by the assessor, if not the community. That same thing would happen here. The loss in values would be recognized in real estate taxes, would be recognized in home values, and in some cases, in this market, the inability of residents to sell their homes at virtually any price. You should hold the university responsible for the basic impact studies that are typical in these situations. I was shocked when I heard earlier testimony, I don't know if it's true, that no traffic studies were done. The university provided no economic impact studies. They're simply saying, we want it, give it to us. I'm suggesting they should be held to the test of demonstrating their representations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Item A, ordinance 135-019, amending portions of the zoning ordinance related to permitted use within the U2 zoning district. The Plan Commission recommends approval of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to revise language regarding permitted uses in the U2 University Athletic Facilities District. This is for introduction. May I have a motion? No, move it. May I have a second? Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded. We are now going to have a presentation from Northwestern University. Mr. Dave Davis, are you presenting?
Yes, I'm presenting.
Thank you.
My colleague, Mike Liskey.
Thank you. You have 10 minutes.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members, city staff. My name is Dave Davis again, and I'm the Executive Director for Neighborhood and Community Relations. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present on our proposal and explain the facts, clear up some of the misconceptions, and discuss the community benefits. Just go to this. So our agenda is pretty simple, and we'll be able to run through this relatively fast. We're going to talk about our pilot project, the standards of approval, the ordinance financial projections, Northwestern's broader economic impact, and also what we're doing to make sure that we protect our neighbors. Before we get started, our president, Morty Shapiro, often says that the university is blessed to be located in the city of Evanston. We believe strongly that for Northwestern to be a great university and continue to attract the best and brightest students, faculty, and staff members, we need a strong and vibrant Evanston. And for over 160 years, Northwestern and Evanston have worked together to make this community an outstanding place to live, work, and learn, and we are committed to strengthening this partnership and enhancing the quality of life for all residents. Mike, you want to take over?
The proposed zoning amendment would allow the university to host a limited number of professional sports, concerts, and other public events in our athletic facility. No modification is needed whatsoever at our facilities in the U2 district. There is going to be a reduction of events that were possible, that we were permitted to have, from 35 to 13 annually. There also is a reduction in the capacity for each of these 13 events from 10,000 to 7,000. And lastly, there is a sunset provision that would repeal the amendment at the end of 2021.
So our proposal is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan. Our facility was specifically designed to host professional sporting events as well as other special events. And our athletic facilities, was specifically designed to host sporting events and other special events. And our proposal would allow us to simply host different types of events in our facilities. We already host sporting events at Welsh Ryan Arena and Ryan Field. Our proposal simply allows us to host different types of sporting events in our venues. Our students already host concerts in Welsh Ryan Arena every single year. We know the impact. We've seen the citations. There hasn't been any. We've heard the complaints. There hasn't been any to my office regarding our concerts as well as our other special events. So this is already taking place. This is not new. We know the impact. It's on record. This would simply allow us to do different types of events. And given the limited scope of our pilot projects, the provisions that were written into the ordinances to protect the surrounding community, and the additional measures we plan to take to protect the safety and security of our neighbors, yes, the proposed text amendment will not have any adverse effects on the values of the properties in the area. And lastly, after 5 hours of deliberations, public testimonies, presentations, and hearings from our community members, the city's Plan Commission of resident experts determined that our proposal as well did not have any adverse effects, as well as that it was consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan, and voted favorably for our proposal.
I want to talk through the financial projections real quick. This is a summary that speaks to the concerts and tennis events. Just again, proposed 6 concerts and then that 7-day multiple sporting event. We just took tennis as an example. NU will pay the city $195,000 and a little bit more in ticket and amusement taxes. Those are the 2 different tax brackets. From a concession standpoint, we pay the city 2% of all concessions that come in, not including any alcohol taxes, and that would be $21,400. And then per the Chamber of Commerce study, with the folks that are coming in, we would generate an additional $1.2 million. For a total on an annual basis of more than $1.4 million based upon the change in this ordinance. If you could turn to the next page, I'll get into the details a little bit quicker. There are 6 concerts. We are recommending 6,000 attendees with an average cost of $85. The average cost nationally right now for a concert is $94 plus. Revenues of a little bit more than $3 million, and then the tax revenues at the 4% is $122,000. The tennis events, a smaller crowd, 2,500 perhaps. The average cost of ticket is $35 for $600,000 in revenue, but that's at the 12% for $73,000. And then the projections for the concessions, 13 events, $53,500. A per cap estimate of $20 a head, which generates $21,400 in revenues. And then this last one I think is important to delineate as well. While we expect to have roughly 53,000 so people come to these events. We have taken a 25% reduction on the attendees based upon the fact that we don't want to have any duplicity that there might be Evanston residents that will be going that won't in fact be spending the $30 a head. So we reduced that to 75% of the expected attendance at the $30 per cap to generate the $1.2 million in revenue.
I want to take a moment here to just talk about the broader economic impact of Northwestern's presence here in the city of Evanston, because we've heard a lot over the last 7 months that Northwestern does not contribute to the city of Evanston. We only provide our $1 million Good Neighbor Fund. So I just want to be clear. Our opponents are correct that Northwestern is exempt from paying any local property taxes. However, Northwestern pays the city an estimate of $9 million annually in taxes and fees. And because Northwestern provides most of our municipal services ourselves for our land and our buildings, we actually save the city money because we take care of our water infrastructure. We take care of the maintenance for our streets and snow plowing. And so the cost of Northwestern being in Evanston and our revenues, we actually don't add an additional cost because of those services. As well, the university's total presence in Evanston would generate a total economic impact of $200 million plus $350 million. The $150 million annually is through university payments to the city of Evanston, university purchases from local businesses, our spending at shops, restaurants, and rents paid by our students, faculty, and staff, as well as local spending by visitors to Northwestern University. Last year alone, we had 65,000 unique visitors that stopped by our visitor center, and we estimate that Northwestern attracted 195,000 visitors from outside the region for a total of 425,000 visitors days, which is just an average of how many days each one of these individuals stay in the city of Evanston. We're also proud to strengthen our community by supporting and fostering a local ecosystem of businesses and nonprofit organizations. Northwestern has contributed $11 million last year alone to support over 230 local Evanston vendors. And our sponsored research directed by our distinguished faculty brings in over $200 million per year in pursuits of innovation and new knowledge. In addition to that, Northwestern also impacts local nonprofits in our community. Last year, Northwestern contributed $2.4 million to 40-plus local nonprofit institutions. And through an agreement with Canal Shores, which is located in the 7th Ward, we're able to help a struggling institution raise critical funding to sustain their operations. And our neighbors also enjoy profits from our game as well.
We've had a lot of conversations with the neighbors in close proximity to our venues, and we wanted to talk a little bit about what we would do to make sure we had the additional measures in place to manage.
You have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. To manage these events responsibly. The first is security and policing. We will provide foot patrols on site before, during, and after each special event. We will have the entire area monitored by off-site unified command centers. From a traffic management standpoint, we will provide parking attendants and security personnel to assist with safety and traffic flow before, during, and after the events. From a parking standpoint, this has been a highly contested issue. We have 1,500 spaces in our area. That includes some of the ancillary areas, not in the east or the west, but adjacent to the buildings. And we will also make sure that we reserve ample space on campus so that we will be able to commit to at least 2,000 complimentary parking spaces for each of these additional events with complimentary shuttle service. Trash and litter will take place as we normally do, immediately following if possible, but if not, in the next morning following the quiet hour parameters. Next page, Dave. Communications initiatives, as we mentioned before, we presented at 3 community meetings, 2 of which we hosted. We are developing a database to launch an e-newsletter to make sure that we do a much better job of communicating to our neighbors and the entire city. The ongoing evaluation and assessment, the sunset provision would automatically repeal after a couple years, and we will continue to do our Evanston stakeholder meetings, which we have been doing since 2013 at our behest, just to make sure our communications with the right stakeholders in Evanston are taking place. Lastly, the new Walsh Ryan Arena. There has been some talk about this as well. It's a state-of-the-art facility. It was made for these types of events. That's why we haven't done 35 events in the past, because we didn't have the facility for it, but now we have the facility to be able to do things in a responsible and a professional manner. In preparation of the construction for this, we hired a national company out of Texas, WJHW, which performed an acoustic study on both decibels and frequencies. We implemented
Please
recommendations.
finish this statement, and then we're at our 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. We've had 2 concerts, and we've had 60 events. We have all the appropriate elements in place with the new Welsh Shrine Arena to make sure that it doesn't disrupt the area, the
Thank
proximity, and we've not had a single complaint.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion? Oh, we have Alderman Ravel.
Thank you. So to preface my statement, I want to say to our friends from Northwestern that I certainly do value your presence in the community, and but I am going to be speaking against the amendment. I'm going to talk about 2 issues in particular. One is the standards for amendments, which we've heard a lot about this evening, and the issue of precedent, which we've also heard about this evening. So the Plan Commission and the staff memo in our packet, as well as the presentation from Northwestern this evening, suggests that the proposed zoning text amendment meets the standards for approval of amendments in our zoning code, but simply stating the fact doesn't make it so. Neither the Plan Commission nor the memo from in the packet nor Northwestern have provided evidence to back up this conclusion. I attended the Plan Commission's September 11th meeting, and I also just yesterday reviewed the video of the Plan Commission meeting, the portion where they talked about, where they briefly discussed the standards. In that discussion, the commissioners focused on the notion that the zoning change would, quote, not seemingly increase the intensity of use. And this was based on a faulty understanding of the type and number of temporary events that currently take place on the U2 campus. The ordinance currently does permit up to 7 temporary events each year, each one not to exceed 5 days, for a total, in theory, of 35 days of temporary events per year. And as our Northwestern colleagues mentioned, they should have pointed out that in actuality, they typically host just 3 temporary events, one-day events per year. The Run for Walk 5K race, which attracts about 1,000 participants, Meet the Team event with 800 participants, and a community movie for about 2,500 people. And those are wonderful events. We're glad that they happen, but they are very modest attendance, amateur and nonprofit events. And so increasing from that to the possible 13 days of professional sports and commercial events with as many as 7,000 attendees at each is indeed an increase in the intensity of use in the U2 district. So nonetheless, using this rationale, the Plan Commission members agreed that the first standard had been met, and that was the end of that discussion. They did not refer to any specific goals, policies, or objectives of the Comprehensive General Plan in their discussion. If they had, a relevant goal in the plan that they could have considered is in the section on institutions that states, Evanston, quote, Evanston should support the growth and evolution of institutions so long as the growth does not have an adverse impact on the residentially zoned adjacent neighborhoods. The plan goes on to note that, quote, enforcing the standards of the city's zoning ordinance is essential if proposed changes would disrupt the residential character and environment of surrounding neighborhoods. So we have heard plenty from residents in the surrounding neighborhoods, both tonight and over the last few weeks. I know we all have had many, many emails. We've heard from residents that that events of the size contemplated in the proposed zoning amendment already do disrupt their lives. And the comparison really is with the men's basketball games, which attract up to 7,000 people and take place in Welsh Ryan Arena. When there is a men's basketball game, residents come home from work and they can't find a place to park near their homes. And even if parking in the Ryan Field lot is made free for these events, many people's first choice is still to park in the neighborhood because it facilitates their getting out of town quickly. And they're really not going to take a shuttle over from the main campus if they, as another option. And when there are special events, the setup and takedown are typically accompanied by trucks and trailers with work crews and beeping backup alarms. And depending on the event, this often happens early in the morning or certainly late in the evening, and does definitely disrupt for the residents who live nearby. The addition of as many as 13 days of such events would indeed have an adverse impact on the residentially zoned adjacent neighborhoods, and so would not be consistent with the goals and policies of the Comprehensive General Plan. This would represent a 72% increase over the 18 men's basketball games currently played at Welsh Ryan Arena. The second standard that we're supposed to consider asks whether the amendment is compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity. The Plan Commission was actually split on that question. As I say, the discussion was really very brief. But I say the answer is no. Professional sports and commercial events are not compatible with the residential character of the neighborhoods surrounding the U2 district. This has been the conclusion of previous city councils when the university has sought to host commercial events on the U2 campus. In 1977, for example, the City Council denied Northwestern's petition for a variation to permit professional tennis matches, finding that the proposed variation, quote, would alter the essential character of the locality by increasing the intensity of the use so as to detract from the essential character of the surrounding residential neighborhood. And moving on to the third standard, will the amendment have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties? This evening we've had the benefit of some expert testimony indicating that property values are indeed likely to be harmed by the introduction of professional sports and commercial events on the U2 campus. Moving on to the question of precedents. A 2-year pilot does sound very reasonable, but Northwestern could use this pilot as precedent in arguing for additional and bigger events in the future. Indeed, the Northwestern city history is replete with examples of pro sports events held on the U2 campus, most in violation of Evanston zoning code at the time, but that were later used as precedent to argue for still others. So in 1970, for example, Evanston sued Northwestern unsuccessfully in an attempt to stop a professional tennis tournament at McGaw Hall. Meanwhile, Northwestern and the Chicago Bears reached an agreement for the Bears to play the Philadelphia Eagles at Dyke Stadium. The Bears sought an injunction to prevent Evanston from enforcing its zoning ordinance to stop the game, and the Bears attorney used that earlier illegal tennis match as evidence for the injunction. One of my predecessors as 7th Ward Alderman, who was referred to earlier this evening, Steve Engelman, cited his concern about precedent when he opposed a 1996 application for a zoning amendment and special use permit to allow an Ameritech Cup tennis tournament at Welsh Ryan Arena. And as he wrote to a resident, while the women's tennis tournament may appear to be benign, its allowance would eventually make it easier for other events which would have a more drastic impact upon you, your neighbors, and the residents of the 7th Ward. And in a unanimous vote, the City Council denied that zoning application. So in my view, our U2 zoning provides safeguards, quote, to ensure that temporary uses shall not impose an undue adverse effect on neighboring streets or property. And I urge my council colleagues to hold fast to the existing standards and vote no on the proposed amendment.
Is there any further discussion? Yeah, Alderman Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I could not have said it more eloquently. I agree with Alderman Revelle, and I also agree with the speaker who said that, we really have to, whenever we have these issues that come before our boards and commissions, we have to follow what our ordinance says. And the burden every single time is on the applicant, and it's the applicant that must show that they will not create a burden. The burden of proof is on the applicant to demonstrate that every element is met. So when I look at this and I see that the proposal, the requirement that this is consistent with the comprehensive general plan, I don't see how that, I don't hear anything from Northwestern that has been met. Simply saying that the Welsh Ryan Arena was designed to be soundproof and designed for these events does not tell me how that is compatible with a comprehensive general plan. Where is evidence of similar commercial events in a similar residential neighborhood that does not have, where it does not have a negative event, a negative impact? It's not, Northwestern has not presented evidence to that effect. Northwestern has also failed to present evidence that this is compatible with the overall character of the existing development in the immediate vicinity. Once again, the burden is on Northwestern. It's not to talk about what the facilities are, but it's to describe how they meet the standard, and I don't believe they have met the standard here in that instance. And on the third point, what is the adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties? In my time, all of my time here on the City Council, and when I was a citizen just like you sitting in the audience, I was part of a group that did hire an appraiser to testify on behalf of a cause that I worked on, and I've heard from many appraisers on exactly this issue over the years on whether an applicant has or will create an adverse impact on the value of adjacent properties. I don't see anything here that Northwestern has presented from an expert that would demonstrate to me that this will not have an adverse impact. I hear that there was a study done by the Chamber of Commerce. I don't see that study. I'd like to see the numbers of that. I'd like to see what the questions were and understand that better. I do very much appreciate Northwestern and what it does for Evanston, and I do like the color purple. It's just completely unplanned. But once again, they have not met the burden. We must require applicants to meet the burden that is in our ordinances. That's how our ordinances continue to work. And finally, the adequacy of public facilities. I don't believe that Northwestern has demonstrated that there are adequate facilities for these events with particular respect to the parking. So for all of these reasons, I don't believe that Northwestern has met the standard that is in our ordinance, and so I cannot support this.
Alderman Wilson.
So, and I don't want to just vote, so I feel like it's only fair to try to, talk a little bit more about this. We've gotten a lot of information, a number of comments from people. I appreciate that. I tried to get through, hopefully, if not all of it, most of it. And, it's a challenging situation. I don't live in the neighborhood, okay? I spend a lot of time in the neighborhood. I see what's described. So I don't want to, I don't take issue with what people report with regard to what their experience is. But I think as we look at the standards here, it really maybe more of the fundamental question is whether or not we believe Northwestern. So Northwestern says something, but it's a question of whether we believe them as opposed to whether or not they've enumerated whether they will meet the standards or not. So things like zoning historically are challenging. Zoning has a very troubled historical past as a tool. It's evolved over a long period of time. I think it's far more useful now than it was, obviously, at a different point in time. But I think you have to look at zoning very carefully in the context and in its historical context. And in communities, things evolve. Things aren't the same way that they were when they built the original stadium. The new basketball facility is different than it was when they first put it in. There's a different baseball stadium. But at the same time, the community itself is also consistently evolving. What our expectations are evolve, who lives in the neighborhood evolves, the businesses that are there evolve. And my preference is to try to take that evolution forward, but to do it in a measured and controlled manner. I absolutely agree that it's okay not to say no. It's okay to say no to Northwestern or anybody. I've said no to a lot of people over the years, but I think it's sometimes okay to say yes to trying things. One thing that really stands out in my mind, I realize it's, apples to candy bars, but outdoor dining. When I started in this job, we had, not zero, but almost no outdoor dining. And the first couple people who wanted to have outdoor dining were met with an extremely strong amount of resistance. And now we have outdoor dining all over the city. And I think we can all agree that that's a really wonderful thing about our community. So I don't know if these events will be wonderful or they won't be wonderful. But when I review the standards for the change, I feel like the university has presented a case that they can meet those. At the same time, I'm appreciative of the idea that we can take this on a temporary basis and to make sure that it works. I understand that there's a question of trust by members of the community. I think that in many situations and instances, that's well-founded. But that's why I'm supporting this, because it is finite, and I'm interested to see how it plays out. But if it doesn't play out, it will change. I do think in the next couple of weeks, if it doesn't get introduced, what we should do is develop some measurable parameters that we can utilize 2 years from now. Who knows who's going to be here and who's not going to be here, but I think when the council is going back and looking at this, it's not going to be fresh in our minds, and I think we're going to want to have something specific and something that they can look at and deliver on. So you either deliver or you don't deliver, but if you don't deliver, it's not going to get reconsidered. So that's how I'm looking at this, and it presents challenges for everybody, but I do think that the standards have been met.
Alderman Rainey.
Well, I thought it was interesting to hear people express their observations who live very close to each other. Some people felt that they were overly impacted. Other people felt they were not overly impacted, and they live in the same place for the same number of years, 20, 30 years. So that was interesting to me. I'm looking at this as 7,000 seats, 1,500 parking places, 3 blocks from the train station. This is the arena. One person referred to Soldiers Field and Allstate Arena. That's not what we're talking about. And I was surprised to hear Northwestern say tonight that they're talking 6,000 seats as opposed to 7,000. I'm thinking it's 7,000. It is a pilot program. I talked to Ms. Mann, who fears that the next comeback from Northwestern will be the stadium. I told her tonight that I will absolutely never, ever vote, if I am here, vote for a proposal complementary to this for the stadium. Never, ever. This is a defined number. There's only 7,000 seats there. Or 8,000 seats. They're limiting it to 7,000 for 2 years. I'm willing, as Alderman Wilson said, for a trial. Pat Hughes, who lives next door to the arena, finds that's acceptable and is willing to look at a trial. I think the chamber's presentation, and they did give us a copy of that, is very, very interesting. I've read those results also. I'm a former licensed appraiser, and I know that things like quarries and things do reduce your property values, but I don't believe, I don't agree with Mr. Richter that this is going to reduce property values. I think we need to give this a try. I'm going to support this. I absolutely, positively would not support when they come, if they were to come back for a redo on this, I would never agree to it if there were any kind of issues. I don't believe there are going to be any kind of issues. And if there are, they're out of luck. They would be foolish to pursue this if there were issues. Parking is not going to be an issue. I don't believe parking is going to be an issue. 7,000 people don't come in 7,000 cars, so especially to concerts. I think we have an opportunity here. I think we need to give it a chance. And I agree with former Alderman Grover. This is a best practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Suffredin.
Sure. I'm just going to say, like, there are a lot of reasons why the people in my part of town don't trust Northwestern, and I'm not surprised by the council's willingness to roll over for Northwestern. Historically, that's what this council's done. But I do think, you know, it's only 2 years is true. That's valid, but it's 2 years of their lives that we're playing with. I think, you know, we always talk about where's the real opinion of Evanstonians. You know, you can't count on, there's a vocal minority who shows up all the time, but I mean, to see 2 representatives from Northwestern, 5 speakers in favor, all these people, and then to say, well, you know, we'll just trust Northwestern when they've proven themselves to be untrustworthy consistently is really disheartening, because this town can be so much better than it is. And it's our fault up here a lot of the time. And right now, just rolling over for Northwestern, a university that does not make the same level of contribution to the community that hosts it as other universities in their class, is just very disheartening. And I'm not even surprised. I guess that's what the most disappointing thing is. That they're going to go back. What was the term, Dave? Townies? Was that what President Shapiro called us at the Wilson Club? They're going to go back and say, these dumb townies just give us whatever we want. And that's what's going to happen here unless somebody changes their vote. So, again, when we got here, we did a sanctimonious Athenian oath where our whole thing was that we were going to transmit the city better than it was transmitted to us. Sometimes the way to do that is by saying no. And that's an example here. We can say no. They claim that they didn't want that Friday night game, but they're not giving back the revenue they got from it. They're always going to say that it will take to get the minimum number of votes they need to do what they want. And apparently we're always just going to give it to them. And all it's going to do is push people to Wilmette and Skokie and Glenview, where they can have a North Shore living experience without having to put up with the burdens that Northwestern places on the residents of Evanston. So I respect everyone's positions, but I'm very disappointed in this vote.
Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I've got to take a little bit of exception with Alderman Suffredin's remarks. The First Ward borders Northwestern, and I don't think anyone in the 10 years that I've been on the council and the 15 to 20 years before that when I was a community activist defending our neighborhood, that anyone rolled over for Northwestern. And I can point to a number of facts, including the challenge to our local historic district that we put in place in order to protect what's a beautiful residential neighborhood, again, that borders the T1, T2 zoning districts at Northwestern. During my campaigns, I tell everyone, my job is to protect the city's interests. Northwestern's job is to protect their interests. And if we don't understand that, then you don't understand the relationship. So we have, out of the outgrowth of that historic district and the litigation that was filed, one of the terms of the settlement of that litigation was to establish the NU City Committee. The First Ward Alderman, myself, is permanent chair. We meet quarterly, and we talk about issues of development that affect the residential neighborhood that surrounds the university, as well as T1 zoning districts, of which is part of just west of Ryan Field. I haven't seen any of you there, so you're more than welcome to come. It's on the city's calendar, and we'd be thrilled to have you there. But I will tell you that over the time, and this is many years, that I've been observing Northwestern, trying to work with them, mostly unsuccessfully. When Morty Shapiro came, there was a real change. Now, I don't know whether we can thank him entirely or thank Mayor Tisdall entirely, but something happened. And there is no bigger critic of Northwestern than I am, even though I'm wearing my purple sweater too, and I don't know why. But these are serious issues to me, and neighborhood protection is a serious issue to me. It is what my ward is all about. And what I have found is that over the past few years, as long as we've had the NU City Committee working with the administration at Northwestern, and I will thank President Shapiro for replacing some of the administrators at Northwestern that were a real problem and stood in the way of a positive working relationship with the university administration, that things have gotten a lot better. Do I trust Northwestern? No. Why should I? I don't. But we're up here to ensure that any agreement that we have with the university is fair and protects the city. Now, Alderman Ruth Simmons and I work with the university every single day on issues that affect us in our ward. And I'm not going to speak for her, but what I will say is that, again, what we've seen is that the university has been extremely responsive. And I'm very happy about that. And I will say to you that the zoning issues that we've had in the past have been serious, and they basically include land acquisition. And they go back, I know Alderman Revelle remembers these from 25 years ago. They go back a long time when the community really fought about this. What they're asking for right now is not that, though. And I understand your fear, because I've been there, I've felt that, I know that, but that's not what their ask right now is all about, is fear. I agree with my colleagues who have said that they would absolutely never support any use of Ryan Field and 50,000 seats in Ryan Field. That will not happen. Is there any other venue in Evanston that provides 7,000 seats? I have a hope that Michelle Obama will come one day and speak, and I want to go and hear her speak. And do we have a place in Evanston? I suppose we could fill Ryan Field if she came and spoke. But I would love that. But I think there's an opportunity here that's worth investigating, and there are enough questions about whether this can work and benefit the city and be consistent with the community that we should give it a chance. In 2 years, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we say no, and they go home, and that's the end of it. But if it does work, there's an opportunity that I think we need to consider. And this has nothing to do with money coming into Evanston or anything like that. It has to do with energizing our community and creating more events. I asked Mr. Davis, I said, what kind of events are you thinking about? Are we doing mud wrestling or tractor pulls? And I was assured that the events that they have planned are going to enhance the reputation of the community and of the city of Evanston. I want to see that. Maybe that won't happen. And if that doesn't happen, we say no again and we all go home. But I think it's worthwhile taking the opportunity for the 2-year trial here. And I know that if this passes, I don't know whether it will come out of committee tonight or not, but if it does come out of committee and goes to the full council, I'm sure that the council will direct our corporation council to make sure that all of the protections are in place that you need. Now, I've there are protections that I need. I need to make sure that all the parking is going to be free. So that will mean that the shuttles are going to work, that they're not going to be impacting on the neighborhoods, that there's going to be some effort to make sure that all of you who want to park on the streets can do so. And all the other issues that you've raised, I want to make sure that those protections are in place for you. So the 2-year trial actually ends up being a 2-year trial with those protections, because otherwise it's going to die at the end of 2 years. And if that happens, it happens. But for right now, I think it's worthwhile taking the opportunity, seeing what's going to happen, giving Northwestern this limited opportunity, and staying looking at the larger picture for the city of Evanston, because I think there might be some valuable opportunities here that we can't see right now because we're in the midst of an emotional dialogue.
Thank you. So as Alderman Fisk stated, I do have I've heard the number as many as 1,500 students that are my neighbors in the ward, and quite a few property owners that pay very close attention to what's happening at Northwestern. And as a result, I advocate on our behalf, the neighbors of the 5th Ward, and I absolutely do not lay down. And most of my conversations with Northwestern are challenging them to serve our communities better. Usually they are pretty intense. And I would like to work more towards solutions. I think that I drove around the area on the day of an event, and one thing that I noticed that I don't think that we document, and I haven't heard much about, is all the property owners over there that sell parking spaces on their front yards. And I didn't hear about that, but I did see quite a bit of it, and I'm not sure if it's isolated to that one game that I went to, or is it a common practice? Can anybody nod? Is it a common practice? So it's a common practice that is happening, and I would say that some residents over there are inviting and encouraging the activity because they're profiting from it. So I also want to say that Northwestern is a multi-billion-dollar organization, and as a result, we get the benefit of all that they do for our economy. They, I don't know how many residents are living here, so because of them, we don't have residential and commercial vacancies, and so we can all agree that they are very important to the community. I do have some concerns about process, though, and this has come up with a matter in my ward. And I'm going to be voting that this goes to the full council because I'm still waiting on some answers to some questions about the process. And I understand that because this is a text amendment and it did not have to go through DAPR, and my questions are, in whatever process it did go through, were matters of concern that would have been answered in DAPR, were they answered in these commissions and committees that it did pass through? So waiting on that, and just trying to understand more about how many meetings there were. I'm just getting very educated on this, and I have some questions that I believe I can get answers to before we get to council. But my biggest concern is the process, the transparency, the public participation. It seems like it was pretty extensive, but I do have some questions that I believe our staff can answer about operations of our city, like safety and public vehicles and such. So I'm hoping that if I can't get an answer to that now, that we can get one for discussion in City Council. I appreciate that this is what is we calling a sunset clause, or this is a pilot. So we can condition this how we like, and I certainly will have some very high expectations on how we enforce this because I'll be hearing from my neighbors. So I'm going to put that pressure on you, Mr. Davis, and the rest of you at Northwestern. But I think we have some protections in that it's a pilot, it's 2 years. We can not move forward with it. We can learn from it and improve it. Maybe we can get Michelle Obama here, or maybe we get a Bad Boy reunion concert. That would be kind of nice. noise. Either way, I am going to be supporting that we move forward with this for further discussion, and I'll work to get the answers that I need for City Council. Alderman Nguyen?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to, after listening to the discussion, and I appreciate your questions that you want to get further answers to. I'd like to hear them too. And I'd like to say that I don't have hostility towards Northwestern at all. I'm a Northwestern Law School alum, and I've lived here for a long time, and there have been issues that have come before the council where I have disagreed very strongly with Northwestern, and there have been times when I have supported them. My issue here is that I do not believe that Northwestern has met the burden, and it may very well be that Northwestern could have met this burden, but they did not in this instance. And to me, as much as I appreciate that this is a pilot program, we don't have separate standards for a pilot program. They're the same standards that they would have to meet. And maybe we should have separate standards for a pilot program, but then we also have to have some type of agreement with the applicant that they will also not use anything during that pilot program as precedents in a lawsuit. So, I do want to emphasize, to me, this is not a war with Northwestern, but to me, I am looking at our ordinance, and I am looking at the standards, and there are ways that applicants can meet those standards, and that burden is on them. And when I look at this and balance that, I do not see that the applicant here, which happens to be Northwestern, has met those standards. So I really want to emphasize, we have our ordinances and we have the standards, and we really have to adhere to the law. And that's what our goal is here. Well, you all might have been disappointed in me if I felt like they had met the burden of proof. So that's my point, though, is that that's what we are dealing with. Not whether we trust each other or not. It's the law doesn't look to that. What the law is looking at is, did you meet the burden of proof? What did you present? And that is the key here. Thank you.
Director Leonard?
In response to Alderman Simmons' question about process, text amendment is, the notification for that is a notice in a paper of local circulation, not 15 days, not less than 15 days, not more than 30 days prior to the public hearing, and the public hearing is convened at the Plan Commission. They are the body that deliberates. And I don't know if Attorney Mason-Cupp, if you want to add anything.
Good evening, Michelle Mason-Cupp. So I think the difference is that the text amendment is citywide. And so if you were to send out notices that are contemplated in a map amendment, which is much more local, you would have to send out the notices to the entire city of Evanston. So the notices that you see, that we've seen for planned developments and special use applications that you're very familiar with, those are not applicable here because it's just the text of the actual zoning code. So that's the distinction.
Can we request that it go through DAPR? I mean, I know it's outside of the process, but it's...
So this is just my take. So DAPR is project specific, and DAPR reviews if turn lanes or height of buildings or setbacks or building materials. For text amendments, it's whether or not this use should be added to the zoning code to be permitted. So it's a very different issue. DAPR wouldn't really have the jurisdiction here.
So where I'm trying to get at, I heard mentioned that there hadn't been traffic studies and some other valid concerns. I'm trying to get to how do we do that?
Sure. Those concerns should be addressed at Plan Commission. So Plan Commission will take testimony. They'll have a full hearing. So they review the same standards that the City Council is reviewing now. So any applicable testimony would be presented by both the applicant and by the opposition.
Alderman Ravel?
But that didn't happen at the Plan Commission meeting is the problem. And then the body that is likely to be involved in evaluating individual events is the Special Events Committee, which is a staff committee, rather than DAPR, which looks at a project. So the way the amendment is written, or maybe it's one of the conditions that the Plan Commission suggested, they talked about making sure that these special events go to that these new kinds of events would go to the Special Events Committee and then also have to come to council.
Okay, is it going there, or are you saying that would be a more appropriate body?
That would be, if this amendment gets approved with some tweaking, major tweaking, then that would be what would have to happen going forward. But it's not part of the process before we vote on the amendment.
Alderman Rainey?
Yes, thank you. Well, I've attended numerous special events meetings, and they are very intense, and they get down into the weeds. Second of all, though, I wanted to ask about when Ryan Arena was developed. I am certain that traffic studies had to have been done regarding the number of seats that were in the arena. And I'm sure they're available someplace, and I would like us to get those. This is an introduction only. We have 2 weeks before this comes back to the council for further discussion. So I would like our staff to look into those, into that paperwork. I'm sure there are documents. There has to be. I mean, they couldn't have built a project of this size without traffic studies. So I think there are actually 8,000 seats in the arena, and there have to be traffic studies. They wouldn't.
Thank you.
have built.
Just trying to get to that, because I heard that hadn't been done. I think that's a fair concern. So.
No, but traffic studies, yes, but the traffic studies had to have been done for building the building. And building the building had to do with having 7,000, 8,000 people there. So there are traffic studies, maybe not for a concert,
right,
but same number of people are going to be coming regardless of when they built the building. So I would like to see.
Got it. Just asking that we could see it.
I know. I want to see it. Okay. And so they have 2 weeks to get them to us. Get them
we could
quickly.
Get that. That would be helpful. Alderman Ravel?
Well, and in addition, I think we want to see what the parking requirement was, and because I believe there had to be some variations given, because the number of parking spaces is less than is required.
Good point.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
So we have 1, 2.
Alderman Simmons, could you do a voice vote on that, just for the record? Thank you.
Sure. Who do I have to start with? Someone? Alderman Sufferton? No. Alderman Ravel? No. Alderman Rainey?
Aye.
Alderman Fisk?
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen? Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
And I am a aye, yes. Okay, so 4-3, the motion for introduction passes to City Council. And do we have any items for discussion? Items for communication?
Yes, one matter is the November 11th Planning and Development Committee meeting. We would like to propose canceling that so you would have a longer time to do budget discussion that night. We don't have any matters other than, I think, the reference to the condo deconversion, and that would just carry to the 25th.
Alderman Sufferton?
Are we meeting at all? That's Veterans Day.
I don't know about that.
I thought that we were canceling that meeting because it's Veterans Day.
That might be a better question for the full City Council.
I think that was what we talked about.
Okay. So we'll finish that discussion at City Council. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Is there a second? Meeting is adjourned. City Council will start
Canceling the council meeting?
at 8:45.